true up at the end. So each year we come in, we project what, based upon our load and our contracts and spot markets, how to set that rate for each year. And you're always doing a true up from the prior year because no one is exact in their estimates. So you either over collected or under collected in your estimates, and that's all wrapped up, and that rate gets set for the year going forward. That's what we're here to do today. Those rates are already in effect. Like many of the cases, we make a filing, rates go in effect subject to refund. So if you decide to approve the rate today, and I think there's agreement amongst all the parties that it should be, then you will be just making final rates that have been in effect since June 1st already. So with that, I'd like to introduce a gentleman who I don't think has testified in this case before.
Correct. This is my first time live before you.
So this is our witness, Robert Cohen, and if I can find my notes, we can get started. Whoops. Oh, my notes. I put them here so I wouldn't lose them.
Sir, please raise your right hand. State your name, please.
Robert Joseph Cohen,
Spell your last name.
Coan.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you do it again. Okay, Mr. Cohen, you've already stated your name for the record, but we ask you to do it again just one more time.
Robert J. Cohen.
Okay, and who do you work for, Mr. Cohen?
PHI Service Company, primarily on behalf of Delmarva Power.
Okay, and what's your job there? What's your capacity in your employment?
I am a senior rate analyst in the rate department.
Okay, how long have you been in that specific position?
I've been in that specific position 5 years, but I've been with the family of companies, Delmarva, Connective, Exelon, or Pepco Exelon, for 37 years, doing mostly utility accounting.
Okay, and what's your educational background? This filing that we're discussing right now?
Yes, I am primarily responsible for the filing.
Okay, and when was this filing submitted?
March 31st of 2017.
Okay, and as you heard me discuss just in the opening, the rates actually went into effect already, subject to refund, correct?
Yes, there was an order last May where you guys approved, the commission approved the rates temporary to be effective beginning June 1st, 2017.
All right. Would you just briefly explain for the commissioners the purpose of this filing?
The purpose of this filing is to revise the electric tariff rates for the renewable portfolio standards charge and the renewable portfolio standards credit, though that credit has been zero for the last few years after a transition period. And the revised rates, as you have already stated, include estimates for the current period, which in this case is June 1st, 2018 through May of 2019, plus the prior period's true-ups for over or under collections.
Could you explain briefly to the commissioners what the filing is composed of?
It includes revised tariff sheets, the calculations for the RPS charge and the RPS credit, a rate change percentage, and many supporting work papers.
And is it the same methodology used this year as you've used in the prior years?
Yes, there were no changes in methodology in the current filing.
And in working on this filing, did you have meetings with staff and the public advocate?
We hold, like we do most years, for the last several, held a formal technical conference at a company location, and then, where staff and DPA are invited, and then there's multiple rounds between formal and informal discovery. There's formal discovery and then a lot of back and forth on the telephone, but yeah, so there's, I think, considerable contact there.
Is it fair to say that there's quite a bit of paper, or sometimes we can't call it paper, digital documents exchanged in that process?
There's a lot of digital documents, but I think this year, especially with RPS, it was phone, a lot of phone contacts and just a lot of more personal contact, but
Okay.
avoided a lot of that, what we used to say, killing trees. But
Did the staff or the public advocate raise any issues with the materials provided?
They did not note in their memo any material differences. There are some minor adjustments that came up either in their discovery process or some which we even raised at the technical conference because we had found them in the meantime. But again, all very, very small and will be adjusted in the next filing scheduled for March of 2018.
So they'll be, in essence, part of that true up because they're so minor.
Yes.
Safe to say, okay. And was a notice of this application published as required by the order you referred to before?
Yes, Order 9062 from last May required us to publish on June 1st and June 2nd, and we did on those dates in Newcastle and Kent counties, and yes.
Okay. And then affidavits of publication, were they filed with the commission?
The affidavit was filed with the commission on June 12th, 2017.
Okay. And has staff issued its recommendation, if you're aware, as to whether the rate should be approved as filed?
We have been provided a copy of the staff memo and order where they do recommend approval, final, as final.
Okay. What's the impact, to an average residential customer of this filing, if approved?
In one of the last filings, we'll probably use the 1,000 kilowatt hour average that's been used for probably 100 years. It would raise a customer's bill using 1,000 kilowatt hours, 27 cents a month.
And that's taking into account the increase in percentage that happens every year?
Yes,
RPS?
yes, so,
So this year's increase would be approximately, and correct me if I'm wrong, 27 cents a month for the average or typical 1,000 kilowatt customer?
correct.
Increase in percentage that happens every year? with
Yes,
RPS?
yes, so,
So this year's increase would be approximately, and correct me if I'm wrong, 27 cents a month for the average or typical 1,000 kilowatt customer?
correct, and has been in effect since June 1st of last year.
Do you have any further testimony or anything you need to, feel you need to inform the commission of at this point?
Not at this time.
Okay. That's our director on our, no further questions at this point.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay, Mr. Willard.
Oh, yes, Your Honor, I don't want to repeat what Todd is going over, but just go through a few things here. As you know, he's talking about the RECs and the SRECs necessary to comply with REPSA, the Delaware Renewable Energy Portfolio Standards Act. And that consists of a few things. First, the cost to acquire renewable energy credits and solar energy credits necessary to comply with REPSA. And secondly, the cost and/or benefit of energy from various contracts that the company might enter into. And third, the adjustment from the Qualified Fuel Cell Provider Project, Bloom, on the RPS obligations. The 2017 RPS charge rate, I understand, is 6.6% higher than the 2017 is higher than 2016. Additionally, DPL also seeks to recover in this filing the solicitation and administrative costs for the 2016 SREC procurement program. And pursuant to the Order 8450 in September 2013, this commission approved the 2013 SREC procurement and said, quote, Delmarva will be required to justify any SEU-related costs above what ratepayers would have paid had Delmarva managed the solicitation itself and not used SEU as a contractual intermediary, unquote. And I understand on May 23rd, this commission issued Order 9062, which placed these proposed rates into effect on June 1st. And in the analysis, the staff met with the company. There was discovery, as has been discussed. One of the things we found was that the cost, if Delmarva had done this itself instead of with SEU, it would have cost over $178,000 more. So it was economical to use SEU. And the staff recommends approval of this at Order 9172, and we do have Ms. Pam Knotts here to testify on behalf of staff. So if I have Pam called to the stand.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay, Ms. Knotts, for the record, could you please state your name and address?
Pamela Knotts, 861 Silver Lake Boulevard, Suite 100, Dover, Delaware.
And what's your current employer and position title?
Delaware Public Service Commission, and I'm a regulatory administrator, regulatory policy administrator. Excuse me.
And did you have a role in this docket? What was your role in this docket?
I reviewed the components and the calculation for the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standards rate or the RPS rate.
All right. And what is this particular proceeding for?
On March 31st, as has already been stated, 2017, Delmarva filed the application for approval of the 2017 RPS rate changes, both the charge and the credit rate. And according to the company's tariff, a residential customer using approximately 1,000 kilowatt hours in a month would see an incremental increase of 27 cents or approximately 6.6%. The RPS credit rate is 0 because all the transitional retail contracts that we had since 2012 have all expired. And the commission approved these rates as stated, subject to refund in order number 9062, dated May 23rd.
All right. Did you receive any public comments on this application?
We received no public comments and no interventions.
What was the nature of your review?
I reviewed the calculations, invoices, and worksheets comprising the derivation of the RPS rate. And as part of the RPS rate, I reviewed the recovery of the auction and the administrative costs for the 2016 SREC procurement program, which included the SEU and their contract administrators' costs for the period January through December 2016. And as stated pursuant to order number 8450, dated September 10th, 2013, in docket 12526, we used this as a benchmark to say that Delmarva would be required to justify any SEU-related costs above what ratepayers would have paid had Delmarva managed the solicitation itself and had Delmarva not used the SEU as a contractual intermediary. And this is to ensure that the costs related to the SEU involvement do not exceed the costs that Delmarva would have incurred had they administered the contracts themselves. And if the SEU exceeded them, Delmarva would be required to justify any of the incremental costs.
What did you find in your analysis?
After reviewing a significant amount of documentation, I found one minor error in the posting of brokerage charges in the amount of $54.75, which did not affect the calculation of the RPS charge. After Delmarva was made aware of the error, they reported it was corrected on August 1st of 2017. And I also reviewed the SEU and their administrator contractors' costs for the 2016 SREC procurement program. And according to the document titled Analysis of Administrative Costs for Delmarva Power and Light Company's SREC procurement program through December 2016, Delmarva estimates the cost for Delmarva to administer the SREC program contracts would result in costs approximately 37% higher than the actual SEU incline administrative costs.
What are your recommendations here?
Staff respectfully recommends that the commission approve as final the RPS rates, both the charge and the credit that went into effect on a temporary basis on June 1st, 2017, with proration for the period from June 1st, 2017 through May 31st, 2018.
I think you've already mentioned this, but what will the impact be on Delmarva's, on a average residential customer's bill?
For a 1,000 kilowatt hour customer, it would be approximately a 27 cents per month increase.
All right, do you think your recommendations will result in rates that are just and reasonable?
Yes, I do.
All right, does this conclude your testimony?
Yes, it does.
Thank you very much. Ms. Iouri.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair, Commissioners. The public advocate is not presenting a witness. We do not have any objection to the proposed form of order. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any members of the public present who would like to comment?
Madam Chair, I have one question
Okay.
of Ms. Knox. In the staff memo, Ms. Knox, the RPS charge impact on the monthly bill for residential customer will increase 6.6% with a footnote that says it does not include the qualified fuel cell provider monthly charge. The next paragraph says the RPS charge consists of items 1, 2, and 3, and 3 is the adjustment of the qualified fuel cell provider Project Bloom on the RPS obligations. How is that reconciled? I'm having a little trouble. In one case, it says that the RPS charge is including an adjustment of the qualified fuel cell provider project. And the other statement says, the footnote, that the qualified fuel cell provider monthly charge is not included in the increase percent.
Yes, Commissioner Gregg, the offset for Bloom is taken out of the RPS requirements. So it does lessen the RPS requirements. And if you'll recall that on the bill, there's actually a charge for Bloom and there's a charge for, it's called Qualified Fuel Cell Provider Project Charge, and there's also charge for RPS. So this is just distinguishing that the RPS, the charge and the derivation of the charge has been lessened by the offset of the Qualified Fuel Cell Provider generation. That lessens the requirements for RECs, for SRECs, but the charge is a separate charge, so it does not, that increase does not take into account any increase in the Bloom each month.
Okay, got it. Thank you. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from commissioners? All right,
I move that we accept the order number 9172.
A second?
any questions on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now
Thank
we are on to hearing number 2, the matter of the provision of standard offer service to retail consumers in the service territory of Delmarva Power and Light Company. And this is Mr. Goodman, Mr. Willard, Ms. Marshall, Mr. Delosa, and Ms. Iori. Mr. Goodman, would you like to start?
I would, good evening, good evening.
Please.
Good afternoon again. Somewhat similarly structured filing. This is standard offer service, which Delmarva is required to provide by law for those who elect not to choose their own provider. And we come in here, you've seen us in here many times on this since about 2000 and, gosh, you know what, 7, 6, 5, I don't know. But in fact, you saw just beforehand, the auctions that set this every year. Those auctions aren't involved in this application, but it's nice that you can see sort of the whole process come together. And this, we run these auctions every year. The lowest bidders win. And there are some other costs added in. For instance, the cost of running the auction and other things like that. Once again, we estimate what our load will be, added up, work with staff and DPA, and set the rate every year. At the end of the year, there are adjustments, just like we talked about in RPS for different things. We might have over-collected a bit or uncollected a bit, or under-collected a bit. And so that is handled in the subsequent filing every year. Rates went into effect the same way, subject to refund back on June 1st. So we're in here today. And if you so approve, the rates, they will just become final. Today, rates that have already been in effect. And I understand that we have a memo from your staff recommending approval. And with that, if I can, I'd like to introduce my witness.
Thank you.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, would you state your full name for the record again, sir?
Robert J. Cohen?
Okay, and you are the same Robert J. Cohen that just testified?
Yes, I am.
And I assume that in the short period between your two testimonies, you still work for PHI Service Company, primarily for Delmarva Power?
Yes, although I'll find out whether my badge works when I go back, right?
And you're still a senior rate analyst?
Yes.
Yeah, and you now have 5 years and about 15 minutes of time with the company in this position, right?
Yes, I do.
And now you have 37 years and 15 minutes.
Just about. Actually, tomorrow is my anniversary day, so.
Wow. half.
Congratulations.
37 years on February 2nd, so I rounded up a little bit.
I think he was actually born in our offices.
Feels like it.
That's right.
It feels like it.
But, okay, and we've gone over your educational background, so I'm not gonna drag the commissioners through that, I don't think, unless you want me to. Would you like? No, okay. So now, Mr. Cohen, were you involved in the preparation of this filing that was made on March 31st, 2017?
Yes, I am primarily responsible for the components of this filing.
Okay, and would you briefly explain the purpose of this filing?
The filing establishes the electric standard offer service rates for the period June 1st, 2017 through May 31st, 2018. This includes establishing for standard offer service supply, the supply portion which comes from the annual auctions that Liberty was discussing earlier. There's also a procurement cost adjustment, which is where when we've talked that where we over or under collect on those supply rates, we calculate a procurement cost adjustment the following year, but it shows in the tariff as a separate component or in the filing paperwork. And then we also have the reasonable allowance for retail margin, typically referred to as RORM, and that basically is where Delaware is allowed to recover its administrative costs plus a fixed return, and then again plus or minus any over or under collection from the prior year.
And in this filing, was the same methodology used that's been used in prior years?
Yes.
In connection with this filing, did you have any meetings with the Division of the Public Advocate and the Commission staff?
Yes, our technical conference back on June 21st included both SOS and RPS.
Okay. And were any issues raised by Commission staff or the Public Advocate during that process?
Approximately $2,000 was of items were found to be either miscoded or where they needed to be readjusted in the accounting records. And then we had actually raised, Delmarva had raised at the technical conference, I think by the technical conference or shortly thereafter, the methodology that we've been using for the last few years for calculating interest on the RORM was intended in an earlier settlement to be a 1-year rate, and then we were supposed to switch to the FERC rate, and we had not done that last year, so we offered to recalculate about $30,000 worth of interest on the RORM, lower the interest that we were going to receive on the under collection, and adjust the 2018 filing for that. So altogether, there's about $32,000 in adjustments, which are mentioned in staff's memo that we are going to include in the 2018 filing.
And that'll be in the form of a true-up, as we discussed.
Yeah, it'll be included in the true-up, the normal true-up mechanism.
Okay. And so essentially, you applied all of us, you applied a lower interest rate, and that's what results in the $32,000 that will be credited to next
Well,
year's.
about 30,000. The 2,000 were various minor items, but about a $30,000 lower interest that Delmarva would have been otherwise responsible or eligible to receive.
Okay. Was the notice of this application published?
Yes, as required by Order 9063 from last May. We published on June 1st and June 2nd of 2017.
And were the required affidavits of publication provided to the commission?
The affidavit was filed on June 12th of 2017.
What's the bill impact of this filing upon a typical residential customer?
Annualized across the whole year, summer and winter, because there's different rates between the summer months and the winter months, but annualized, the average per month over 12 months for a 1,000 kilowatt hour customer would be a decrease, or has been since last June 1st, a decrease of $6.34 a month, which would be 4.5% of their entire bill, not just that rate, just of their entire bill calculation.
Okay. Do you have any further testimony or anything you think you might want to inform the commissioners of at this time?
No, not at this time.
That concludes our direct, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions? Mr. Willis?
Okay, again, this was filed on March 31st, as was mentioned. According to the Delmarva's calculations, as was just mentioned, the average bill would go down $6.34 according to this. The settlement contract approved by the commission back in 2009 provided that where the change in the RARM rate exceeds 5.25%, the company is required to submit a formal filing for review. And according to the filing, the RARM rate for fixed price customers increased by 19.5% from the RAM currently in effect. On May 23rd, the commission allowed this to take effect on June 1st, as was mentioned. And as a result of discovery, as also was mentioned, the company is committed to over $32,000 worth of adjustments to be made in the 2018 filing. And the staff is recommending approval of order number 9173, and we also have a couple of witnesses that we'd like you to hear. I would call first Shauna Marshall.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And Ms. Marshall, could you please, for the record, provide your full name and address, business address?
Yes, my name is Shauna Marshall. My business address is 861 Silver Lake Boulevard, Suite 100, Dover, Delaware.
And your current employer and position title?
I'm employed by the Public Service Commission as a public utilities analyst.
And what is this particular proceeding for?
For the 2017 standard office service rates, including the PCA and the RARM, as it has been stated previously, there is a decrease for the average residential customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours of about $6.34 or 4.6%, as already approved in order number 9063.
And was public notice properly posted, and did you receive any public comments on this application?
Yes, public notice was published on June 1st and June 2nd in the News Journal and the Delaware State News respectively, and we received no petitions of intervention or comments.
No objections.
No.
What was your role in this docket?
I attended the technical review workshop and reviewed the procurement cost adjustment for this filing. The RARM and the SOS were reviewed by Joe DeLosa and Pam Knott.
And did Ms. Knotts report to you her review and findings for the SOS fixed price calculations of this rate?
Yes, Pam Knotts reviewed the standard offer service price, fixed price calculations, including the inputs for the winning SOS bid prices and the forecasted megawatt hours to determine the full requirement cost by summer and winter and by rate class. The full requirement costs by season are divided by the forecast billing determinants. She reported she did not find any errors in the calculation of the SOS fixed price component and found them to be consistent with the winning bid prices that were reported to the commission by the consultant.
What was the nature of your review?
I reviewed the calculation and work papers for the PCA and the true-up.
And what is the analysis of the calculations, your analysis of the calculations in the application?
I did not find any substantive errors in the PCA calculation.
And what are your recommendations for the commission?
I recommend that the rates be approved as submitted on a temporary basis.
And do you believe this will result in just and reasonable rates,
Yes,
and it's in the public interest?
yes,
All right, does that conclude your testimony?
yes.
Any questions for this witness? And we'd also like to call Mr. Joe DeLosa to the stand.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Again, Mr. DeLosa, your name and business address for the record.
My name is Joseph DeLosa. My business address is 861 Silver Lake Boulevard, Suite 100, Dover, Delaware.
And your current employer or position?
I work for the Public Service Commission as a public utility analyst.
And what was your role in docket 170164?
I reviewed the documents, worksheets pertaining to the RARM and the calculation of the RARM rate.
And what was the nature of your review?
With my colleagues, I attended the technical review workshop pertaining to the aspects of the filing. I was responsible only for the RARM review. reviewed all of the worksheets submitted by the company pertaining to the calculations for the RARM rate and the supporting invoices pertaining to the incremental costs.
We keep hearing RARM. Could you briefly describe what the RARM is?
Sure. As Mr. Cohen stated, Delmarva is allowed to recover incremental expenses, including carrying charges to provide SOS and hourly price service, cash working capital, and uncollectible expenses related to supply, as well as a fixed profit margin. This charge is embedded in the supply rates for fixed price standard offer service customers, and for customers meeting the eligibility requirements for hourly price service, it is a delivery charge applied to all hourly price service customers.
And what did you find as part of your analysis?
Since the RARM factor exceeded the bandwidth of 5.25%, a new RARM factor was calculated. The new RARM factor is 0.003039, which is an increase of 0.000496. Following our discovery, as Mr. Cohen noted, the company committed to approximately $32,500 worth of adjustments to be reflected in next year's final. I found no additional errors beyond those effectively addressed by the company through the discovery process.
And what are your recommendations here?
I respectfully recommend to the Commission that they approve as final the SOS rates, which includes, among other things, the RARM factor that went into effect on a temporary basis June 1, with proration for the period June 1, 2017 to May 31, 2018.
And do you think your recommendations will result in rates that are just and reasonable and in the public interest?
I do.
And does that conclude your testimony?
It does.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas.
Thank you.
That's all we have, Commissioners.
Ms. Iori?
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. The Public Advocate has no witnesses in this case and supports the proposed form of order. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't believe there's anybody from the public out there. Commissioners, questions?
Move we adopt order number 9173 as presented.
Second.
Any questions on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
And now we're on to Mr. Howard.
Commissioner Conaway,
Yes.
I have been briefed on the SEAMS issue and also on the comments of staff that are anticipated for FERC, and I think positively of the work and I think positively of the comments, and would like to save a little bit of time on my telephone bill, so I'm going to say hasta luego.
Okay. I do want to ask you one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you hear Mr. Goodman's comment earlier?
I heard all of Mr. Goodman's comments.
He said that he thought you sounded like God.
I confess I did miss that.
Okay. Have a good afternoon.
Bless you all.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Howard.
Madam Acting Chair, Commissioners, what a wonderful day it's been. Let me first alert you to the fact that we are having a second opportunity for public comment on Delmarva Power's rate cases. Delmarva had provided supplemental information that added approximately $7 million to their rate case. Therefore, there will be additional public hearings. The first public hearing will be on Tuesday, February 6th at the Carville State Office Building, and that will be at 6 o'clock. The next public hearing will be here at the Dover office, and that will be at 6 o'clock, and that will be on Wednesday, February 7th. And then on Thursday, February 8th, there will be a public comment session at the Indian River Senior Center in Millsboro, Delaware, starting at 6 o'clock. I would also like to alert the Commission that your next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, February the 20th. And at that meeting, you will also have an evidentiary hearing on docket number 171130 which is Chesapeake Utilities Corporation's environmental rider rate. That will occur at 1 o'clock or at the commission meeting. I would like to apologize to everybody out there who's been trying to stay tuned with our live streaming. I certainly apologize for our ons and offs and ups and downs and missing. You know, this world started with black and white movies that had no sound. And we're attempting to make our way back into that situation. Technology is wonderful when it works, and when it doesn't work, too bad. In any event, on the last thing on my agenda, I always save the best for last, we have Mr. Joseph DeLosa here. Joe has been working on a lot of regional issues and a lot of PJM issues, and Mr. DeLosa would like to brief the commission on some PJM issues and some regional issues. Mr. DeLosa.
Thank you, Mr. Howat. Acting Chair and Commissioners, there are two issues before you today. I'd like to switch the order from the agenda so we can go into executive session as the last thing we do. The first issue that I'd like to discuss is a staff memo that I believe all of you are in possession of. It's dated yesterday, January 31. I would like to give the Commission a brief background about kind of the posture of resilience at the federal level. So essentially, that you have in front of you is PJM has requested feedback from the PJM stakeholders for inclusion in PJM's response to FERC on March 9th. So what is included in this memo is not the basis for a FERC filing at this point. It is essentially in bulleted format. Everything except essentially the first page of the staff memo will be continued to be refined with the load coalition, and based upon the guidance that staff receives here today, we would like to, and we would recommend that the Commission authorize us to respond with the positions in the memo to PJM so that PJM can take them into consideration as PJM responds to the FERC. I guess there's a couple ways we can do this. I guess I'll leave it up to the Commission. I can either kind of walk through each of the 8 questions, or I can just take advice or kind of hit some of the highlights. So I guess I'll leave it up to the Commission, which...
What's your pleasure?
Hit the highlights.
One question, Madam Chair, and Joe. To what extent will OPSI be involved in the actual formal response on behalf of the various commissions that they represent?
So, Commissioner Gray, OPSI has elected at this point not to make a response to PJM for their March 9th submission. It has not been discussed at any length whether OPSI will file comments before March 9th or before April 6th, which is the date for reply comments. You'll notice in the first page of the memo, staff anticipates the need to file reply comments in this matter, but we won't know for sure until we get to evaluate what PJM has submitted, and we would come before you with that recommendation at a future meeting.
Okay, and another question. What is the current status from FERC in response to DOE's proposal?
So, footnote 1 is a cite to a FERC order that they issued in response to the DOE NOPR. And essentially what the FERC decided to do is reject that NOPR out of hand, close that docket, which was RM 18-1, and open a new administrative docket to further investigate resilience in a much more comprehensive fashion. So In that order, the FERC asked a myriad of questions from stakeholders seeking to get responses back to help guide FERC as they attempt to figure out what resilience is. The questions that PJM has asked PJM stakeholders to opine on are directly from that order.
And is this March 9 a response to PJM?
So the timeline is a little tough. The March 9 date is the date for initial comments on the order which both closed the 18-1 docket and opened the new administrative docket. FERC, yeah. So PJM will be responding to FERC by March 9. Any other interested stakeholders would be filing with FERC before April 6th. This memo today is to be submitted not to FERC but to PJM for PJM's consideration as to whether they want to include it in PJM's March 9 filing to FERC. I know that's a lot.
Highlights?
Highlights. Yes, sir. So, start off with number 1. And what staff would recommend essentially, and this is this shows up several times throughout the document, is a recommendation that NERC, which is the National Electric Reliability Corporation, be responsible for resilience standards as opposed to PJM having that same responsibility. There's some concern shared among many load interests that if PJM were to develop those criteria or otherwise be left to their own devices with respect to resiliency planning, that PJM may not balance appropriately as we would feel cost and benefits. PJM is essentially very concerned with low frequency, high impact risk, and the concern that staff has is the extent to which money is spent to address these low frequency, high impact risks. The recommendation to ask NERC to develop these standards will ensure that there is some technical and engineering judgment that goes into the development of any mandatory standards for resilience, as opposed to PJM, where the process may not be quite as open or technically rigorous. So that is one of our main recommendations that we make that shows up in several formats throughout the document. You'll see that's very same premise in the 2 sub-bullets underneath number 2, where staff asked specifically for commission clarification that, quote, the commission does not support PJM developed resilience criteria as a basis for RTEP development. NERC developed resilience criteria would necessarily require an engineering basis, including a thorough assessment of need. So that is in large part the first recommendation. I guess the last 2 highlights, one is the sub-bullet under number 6, where based on some of the comments from the commission from previous discussions of resilience, staff wanted to make sure that in this document we specifically noted that we support the concept of resilience, but that we see the need for clear, objective resilience criteria that are subject to stakeholder scrutiny. Because without those clear, objective criteria, we are concerned that costs and benefits may not be commensurate in this instance. Now, Relating to that, I remember specifically Chairman Winslow's support and others on the commission relating to cybersecurity resilience, and staff has been ensuring that PJM knows that we support its efforts related to resilience of its cyber assets, because that is something that, in staff's view, it is very challenging to have mandatory criteria, and there really isn't another entity besides PJM with the assets and the expertise, and PJM needs to make sure it's protected in that regard. So the last question I would have for the commission is both on set number 7 and number 8. Staff would just ask the commission if they feel anything was left off these lists. So the question number 7, are there other generation or transmission services that support resilience? The Load Coalition has suggested 5 here, and I would definitely open up to the commission for any others they would like to see included. Similarly, on number 8, are there any market-based constructs, operating procedures, NERC reliability standards, or planning processes that should be modified to better address resilience? On this score also, staff would be looking for any additional guidance the commission may wish to offer. One last thing I'll note is that this document expresses support for any competitive procurement processes relating to resilience, including non-wires alternatives, as opposed to just transmission investment. Staff and the Load Coalition believes that considering any number of alternatives besides just building new transmission may lower overall cost while receiving a similar or comparable result. So I guess I'll leave the highlights there and ask the commission if they have any questions or guidance for staff.
I have 2 comments, if you don't mind. So up in your item number 2, where you talk about staff recommends clarifying that the commission does not support PJM, I would modify that a little bit, because we might support what they come out with. I might state that in a way that says staff recommends clarifying the commission does not support resilience criteria developed exclusively by PJM, because we might support what they come out with. I think you're trying to say that we don't want them simply exclusively to be the source. And on the last page where you talk under item 8, bullet number 2, NERC, not PJM, should be the entity defining reliability criteria, I would insert "and standards," because if there are to be standards, criteria and standards are a little bit different. So those would be the only 2 comments. Otherwise, it looks pretty good to me.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've taken those notes.
Any other comments or questions? And you would like a motion from us?
I would.
I move that the commission support the guidance and the consultation, the actions proposed by Mr. DeLosa with respect to responding to this issue.
I second it.
Any questions on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you. My second issue, Madam Acting Chair, is the comments of the indicated state commissions. I'll give the commission a little background and then ask to go into executive session.
Let me interrupt for just a second, Mr. DeLosa. Before you go into this and we go into executive session, Madam Chair, I have 2 short items I'd like to bring to the table, if that's okay with you. I'd like to take up one matter over which this commission has absolutely no jurisdiction or authority. And so I don't know whether others in the audience would have comment, but I'd like to make a motion that the Eagles win the Super Bowl on Sunday. Can I get a second? All right, Madam Chair, any discussion?
Any questions out there? Any
Comments?
comment?
I abstain.
So the motion's been made and seconded, Madam Chair.
And all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
All right, and one other very short, just informative piece of information. I'm thanking everyone for this plastic bottle of water. I left the commission to go home last time, and outside my house, there was a woman screaming. There were two ladies trying to separate two pit bulls that had a small Shih Tzu in their teeth by the neck. And I used this plastic water bottle at the nose of the pit bulls and squeezed it, and it worked. And the dog
thank you
survived.
very much.
So, thank you.
very
Yeah, take that in my car all the time, just as a piece of information. Sorry, Mr. DeLoza, I didn't mean to detract.
I'm not sure how I followed that, Commissioner Gray.
Briefly.
I'll send you into executive session. So we'll make this brief, Acting Chair, Commissioners. So, as you're aware, there's been some dispute around the New York, New Jersey seam, which is, as you know, between PJM and New York ISO. Related to those disputes, there have been several concerning aspects between effects on the capacity market, transmission cost allocation, as well as interconnection standards and how those interconnection rights are classified and the associated cost allocation with those rights. I guess at this point, I will ask the Commission to go into executive session to discuss potential litigation positions.
May we have a motion to go into executive session?
Motion to enter executive session.
To discuss
second.
litigation.
Oh, sorry, to discuss potential litigation regarding the New Jersey, New York seam.
I second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?